You need to understand the substance of whatever it is you're talking about. There's all sorts of resources for that, right? There's materials in the back, there's materials on the websites to learn your rights and the basis for them. But I think you need to go deeper and understand the reasons for them. And we'll talk about that a bit as well. William's going to get into that in some depth. But the other aspect, major aspect of the law, is procedure. Right? And there was a saying, I don't know the exact quote, but one legal scholar once said, "You write whatever laws you want. If I can write the procedure, I'll win every case." Because the way you go about allowing people to enforce and express their rights and protect their rights is every bit as important as the rights. And William's going to get into some of the procedural mechanisms in our society and how you can use those to defend your rights. So we have substance and procedure. It's good to keep those two major facets in mind. Now, in terms of the substance, if you want to know what your rights are, what the law is, read the fundamental documents, right? I mean, the Bible is the fundamental document, right? Truth, beauty, and goodness. It's all laid out in there. But the Constitution and the Declaration and the other laws lay out those principles as well. And you have to become familiar with them. And again, William's going to get into the substance of our legal system, and I don't want to take up too much of his time. I want to spend a little more time on procedure, and I'm not talking about civil procedure. I'm talking about how we, as individuals, are going to engage our society. One of the concerns William and I addressed briefly in preparing for this was there are a lot of people from our side out there giving our side a bad name. Right? The way they engage, they're right in what they know and in what they're asserting, but the way they engage is not right. Right? It's given us a black eye. And so I just want to talk a few minutes about that and then get back into William and his substantive stuff. So you need to not only know what your rights are, but how to express them, right? I believe that the cardinal virtue is humility. I think that's a sound biblical principle, and I found it sound in terms of practice, in terms of argumentation and apologetics, that sort of thing. There's a principle from the book by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a few decades ago, but you guys are all in my age range, most of you, and it was new to you at one point, right? You guys at least know about it. It's seek first to understand, then to be understood. How many of us do that? That's no fun at all, is it? Right? You just want to get in there and get your licks in. You react to wrong doctrine when you hear it. You react to insanity when you hear it. Right? That's natural. And we have to overcome the natural man, don't we? All right, so I think that's a critical principle. If you're going to engage with someone and hope to have a fruitful procedural discussion, right? A fruitful procedure in the form of a discussion, you have to see the person. You have to see the Christ in them, because he's there. And we're all made in God's image, right? You have to hear what they're saying. You have to feel it if you really want to connect with them. You have to see what it feels like to be where they are. They're in a bad place if you're concerned about them, right? If they're advocating for, teaching kindergartners about, gay marriage and gender identity questions that they should be raising for themselves, they're in a bad place. But you got to figure out why. And you have to empathize a little bit with the fact that they're stuck there, right? And I think you have to find common ground with them, because they're there because they care. They're doing it wrong. They might care about the wrong things, but they care, right? So you do have common ground in your common humanity in caring for other people and caring to do what's right. They might be wrong substantively about what's right, but that doesn't mean they're not trying. Some of them aren't trying, right? No doubt about it. There's a lot of demonic activity in the culture. But give them the benefit of the doubt, at least as you're starting out, right? So the practice you have is active listening. Ask questions and really listen to the answer. Now, you have to do both of these things. You have to bring substance to this procedure, right? You have to approach them with humility and compassion, but you have to also know what it is you're talking about and what they're talking about. So you have to bring your critical analytical thinking, but bring it with humility. So I think there's steps to doing this. starting with active listening, starting with an open mind and an open heart, sincerely, assimilating their position. The first thing you have to do is compare what they say to the truth. All right? You know the truth. That's the substance. You got to learn that. You got to know what the truth is, what the biblical standards are, what the constitutional standards are. Compare what they're saying to that and see the difference. There's a gap, right? You're here, they're there. What is it that separates us? You have to see that, because if you can't identify that, you're going to be going around in circles. You're just going to be yelling at each other, right? So you have to know the truth, and you have to hear their answer to do that, right? So once you see that difference and identify it, you want to ask them about it. Why do you have that position? You know, and in your mind, or whether you say it out loud or not, as opposed to this one, right? And you're comparing. Here's the standard. Here's where you are. What's the difference? How do we move you toward this? What will you need to see to get from there to here? So one of the main problems in that process is defining terms. Right? They'll say one thing, you'll hear, it means something else to you. Nowadays, equity is a widely used term. In the common law, it meant fairness. That's all it meant. Right? It doesn't mean that anymore. And so if you are using the term equity in the traditional sense and they're using it in the modern sense, you're not going to be able to communicate because you're not talking about the same thing. And you need to clarify that. You need to agree on the definition of terms. That's a fundamental philosophical concept. Okay? So make sure you mean the same thing when you're using the same terms. That's the first step, I think. Part of it, the next thing I think, is to identify the emotionalism as opposed to the reason involved in their position and supporting their position. Not necessarily to respond to it, but just to identify it. And, you know, we need to elevate reason above emotion. We can't reason with our emotions. And so just to segregate the two and keep in mind which was which. Identifying generalizations is huge. Most of the left's positions are built on generalizations. Oh, this person was abused by a police officer over here, so the whole system is corrupt. You know, some white people are racist against black people, therefore all white people are racist. Those are generalizations. They may be based on very real life experiences that deeply affected these people, but their thinking is flawed in that they're generalizing more than they should. Generalizations are a huge source of error. Contextual problems. Taking things, and that last example was an example of this as well, taking things out of perspective, out of proportion, out of historical context, out of global context. This is a problem. Well, okay, compared to what? I mean, is there a better solution or a better system? You know, capitalism is evil. Yeah, it is. Why? Because it's full of human beings and we're evil. But is socialism a better system? Show me one that has ever been better. Show me one that has produced the prosperity. Okay, so you can take anything out of context and let the, let's see, what is this phrase? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because in your mind, you have an ideal world. But out here, you're not going to get that, right? So if you say, well, capitalism, you know, screws people over. Yeah, it does. Socialism screws people over worse. That's the key. So that loss of context, that loss of perspective, it leads a lot of people astray. And then, you know, so identify alternatives, evaluate them. It's easy to complain. It's difficult to criticize. You know, people can say, oh, you're doing it wrong. Okay, fine, show me how to do it better. Right? It's up to us to take that first step in humility. And then we need to aim for clarity. That's the definition of terms and figuring out, well, what exactly is going on here? What exactly are we talking about? And then we need accuracy and precision in terms of the context of the problem and the realistic solutions to it. All right, so I'm going to do the quick quote from St. Augustine. The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself. I think that encapsulates the idea that we're not here to save the world. Right? We don't have to save the world. We already has a savior. Right? The truth can take care of itself. Just put it out there. And don't be, so wrapped up in having to win the argument that you despoil the truth. Right? Let it be. Let it live. You're not going to save anybody. God's grace is going to save somebody, not you. You can help enlighten them a little bit by taking away a little of the darkness, but you have to do it with compassion, or it's just not going to work. All right, so our founders understood all these principles. They gave us a country where we can live like that, right? And you're all here because you care about that. That's why we're here, and that's what William is going to talk about in a lot more depth. Get up and get over here.
It's good to see some friendly faces from before, and it's good to see a lot of new faces too. So, and again, I want to thank Amy and everybody that has put this together. We go, around the state and around the country, and I'm telling you, what's happening right here in this locality is really a template, is really something that everybody can look up to because they're doing it right. This is how you retake ground that has been improperly taken away from you. And when I'm talking about ground, I'm talking about our philosophical, our legal, our families. They've decided that they are going to take the lens through which we see the world and just smash it underneath their shoes. I think you're and then say you are going to have to see the world through the lens that we're telling you have to see the lens through, and forget about your rights. And that was the topic tonight. What was, how do we preserve our rights? How do we protect our rights? How do we defend our rights? Because there's a lot of wrong ways to do that. And John touched on that a little bit, and he also touched on what I thought was, probably the most important thing you'll hear tonight. How you do it matters. You need to be fiercely unafraid, but you need to do it with the heart of Jesus. Because if you don't, you're not going to protect or preserve any one of your rights. What is the lens through which we are seeing? And so tonight, what we want to do and all is, take a few minutes to look at the law, how is it supposed to work, and how is it supposed to work? How did our founders put it together? Because if we can understand that, then we have a much better chance of being able to preserve it and to protect it. And I want to do that in various areas because there's a lot of influence going on in the media sphere or the business sphere or the executive or the legislative or the judicial or increasingly the administrative place. And in each one of those places, you defend your rights or you protect your rights or you preserve your rights in a different way. And there's reasons, for that. What John said applies to all of it, though. How you do it matters. Otherwise, you might as well not do it. Can everybody hear if I get rid of this thing? Is there anybody that cannot hear? All right, then I'm going to keep it on. All right. We'll try.
Yeah, moving all the speakers further away.
Yeah. No. He just switched it once. Yeah. All right. When you are preserving your rights and defending your rights and protecting your rights, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, who's running the show here?
Amy could stand in front of the screen.
I could.
Maybe. What if I come up here? Is that better?
I don't know yet.
There.
I will tell him. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Is the king the law? Is the government the law? Or is everybody under the law, even those that govern you? You might, yes. Instinctively, we naturally know what the answer to that question is, but we also know that for the first time probably we've really seen that in our own lives the last couple of years, right? You might not even have thought of government that way. Because you really they were doing it, but you may not have noticed that they were saying we are the law. But now they got pretty blatant about it, didn't they? And, you know, so when you preserve your rights, you got to ask, what kind of government are we? Because I'm telling you, there's a lot of folks that want to change not just, you know, a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or something. You know, they want to completely change our constitutional form of governance. And so, you know, it's not just about preserving your rights, it's about preserving your form of government, a constitutional republic, where we, the people, still have a say in who does the governing.
It's because you're right here. I'm sorry.
That's right. That should be good enough.
Hey.
Who should speak for the people? Your representatives, or once they get in there, do they get to decide that they get to be the law? If they get to be appointed to a federal judgeship and they put a robe on, do they all of a sudden get to say that that piece of paper, that Constitution, is something that I can change? No. There's a reason that our American nation and our founders of our nation set up the government in the way they did it. There was a reason that they had a lens through which they saw government, a lens through which they saw the world. It's the same lens. You can feel very comfortable knowing that you see the government and the world through that very same lens. And the reason that most of you are upset and are asking the question, how can I preserve my rights? Is because someone is taking away that perspective and saying you can no longer use that perspective to see the world. And you can certainly no longer see that perspective to govern your nation. You cannot see that perspective with regard to your economic system. You cannot use that perspective with regard to the education of your children, because they're no longer your children. They now will become the children of the state. And I hear people say no, and that's one of the first things you have to be willing to do. You know, what is the cost? You know, are you willing to pay on Facebook when you speak the truth, in love, in kindness? You're still going to be attacked. At your work, when you assert your religious conscience with regard to something in particular, with regard to the vaccines or something, for example. And all of a sudden they say, I don't care what the law is, I don't care what your rights are, we're going to do what we're going to do. You know, are you ready to pay the cost? If your children are going to the public school and you're just literally knocked backwards because you see that they're not teaching them reading and writing and math anymore, but they're spending huge amounts of their time teaching these other things that are really about, again, transforming their way of thinking about what government should look like. What are you going to get? What's the cost? And I don't want anybody to, because I'm speaking some hard truth here, because we've gotten very comfortable in our country because of the prosperity that we've had over the last number of generations. And we like having 2 cars. We like being able to go on a vacation. We like, I've lived in places around the world that the prayer isn't, dear God, help, our second car is not working, please Lord help me to fix it, because we've got to get to work there. That's not the prayer they pray. They pray, thank God for letting me live another day in this place where the likelihood of me living is very, very low. If you don't like what the kids are teaching in the public school, either run for school board and throw the bums out, or pull your kids out, skip your vacation, get rid of your second car, and homeschool. And if you're a grandparent, and you saved your money, and you saved all your prosperity, and you plan on giving it to your kids someday when they die, give it to them right now so they can homeschool their kid, because I'm telling you what, you'll save their life right now. You give it to them 10 years from now, this nation may be gone. That's how you begin to preserve your rights, because our founders saw the world very differently than those who want to take away those rights. Do you see that they don't even see them as rights anymore? And, you know, God's purpose for government was to maintain order, condone that which is good, and protect that and punish that which is evil. Maintaining order in society, protecting us, protecting the people. And our founders set up a constitutional framework and a statutory framework that gives you liberty because it comes from God. It recognizes that that liberty comes from God, and that liberty then serves as a limit on the exercise of government power. That is what you are mostly seeing from the school board township level all the way to the presidency of the United States and to the Supreme Court of the United States. That is what you are seeing many, many, many people increasingly deny. They are denying that there is liberty and that there are rights that serve as a limit on the exercise of their power. And so that's the first thing you have to understand. Well, secondly, first thing you have to do is listen to what John said. Because how you present what we're saying matters. But the second thing is you have to understand the gravity of what they're trying to do. They're not just disagreeing with you about the way to educate their child. They're disagreeing about who should own the child. They're not disagreeing with you about what kind of economic system or whether or not we should raise taxes or not. They're disagreeing with you of what kind of economic system we should have. Should it be free market or should it be one where the state controls it? You want to jump in?
Here we go. Yeah, along those lines, the fundamental question of political science is the tension between individual liberty and collectivism. We think of it as capitalism and communism because that's what it is in the economic sphere, right? We are pretty far to the individualist end of the spectrum, as our founders were, and these people are coming from the other end of the spectrum. Collectivism, right? Sacrifice the individual for the group, right? And that's, if you look at their thinking, it's all oriented from that perspective, and ours is oriented from the other one, which is why we're so far apart and why it's so many difficulties. Over the years, we've moved farther and farther and farther toward the collective. We have a capitalist system with a whole lot of socialism built in. And some of it's good, some of it's necessary. Capitalism has its flaws, right? We need to take care of the needy, and if we're not going to do it through individual charity, which is the way we really should do it, we have to have some public charity. And the larger we get, the more, I think, the more necessary that has become. But in terms of them trying to take more and more control, that's always been the case. Show me a government that has ever tried to get less power.
Jefferson said it.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact quote, but I sent it to you.
Yeah.
Anyway, get that. I just wanted to bring up, Biden signed an executive order, I think it was March 8th or 9th, to study the central bank digital currency. Where do you think that's going? That is the most powerful instrument of government control I've ever heard of. If your currency is digital and traceable and controllable by the government. So I just wanted to, it's that collectivist mentality projected far into the future and brought forward into the present. Right? It's like
science fiction.
only worse, because it's becoming real. Anyways,
Well, and so, when our founders said we hold these truths to be self-evident, they were recognizing that God puts the law, on our heart, and that these truths include our liberties. And these are unalienable rights that you cannot take away. The rights that you come here tonight to say, well, how do we preserve them? How do we protect them? And in different contexts, what do we do? How do we preserve the sacredness of life, the sacredness of worship, the sacredness of family and marriage, and the sacredness of property, the sacredness of your word? These are the very core of what our founders recognized was naturally the liberties that are naturally given to us from God, and they are so important that we have to protect them. We're going to put them in the Constitution, and they are going to act as limits on the exercise of constitutional power. And let me tell you, we almost didn't have a Constitution because some people didn't want to put it in there because they said we don't need it. They said we don't need it because they structured the Constitution, and the structure of the Constitution is another way that we preserve our rights, and we can protect our rights. The structure of the Constitution separates power between the three branches of government in the federal government. But in each one of those branches, the Constitution only gives a tiny amount of what we call enumerated powers. They list them. They list the powers that you have as the legislature. They list the powers that you have as the president. They list the powers that you have as judiciary. Well, they only give the judicial power. And then they said, if they're not listed there in the Constitution, all of the rest of that power that's ever exercised by government has to be, reserved to the people and to the states. Okay? Do you see how that structure limits and preserves your rights? Because, and the reason, and here's the lesson. When you see government acting, check the structure. Within the structure, have they been authorized to engage in the action? Within the structure, the way our Constitution is structured, does the Constitution give whatever government actor is acting the power to do what they're doing to you? And you'll be surprised how many times the answer to that question is no. We took on the governor 160 times and won 160 times, not because she was interfering with religious liberty and she was interfering with freedom of speech. We didn't have to get that far because we asked the first question, do you even have the authority to do this in the first place? And that's one of the ways that you can preserve and protect your rights is by looking at the government action, seeing if, and then check the Constitution. Check the authority or the statute and say, do you have the authority? Does the law give you the authority to do that? If they don't, then step forward. Even if a government entity, and I'm talking, it can be the dog catcher, it can be the school board, it can be anybody. Even if they are acting within the scope of their authority, the other way that you protect your rights is that you next look and see, are they substantially interfering with one of these constitutionally protected and inalienable rights of ours? And usually you can tell right away, can't you? Because, and I'll give you a couple examples. We've got a couple cases in the U.S. Supreme Court right now that we're working on. We're helping a coach of a school like yours around here that, thought he'd bow the knee to something, other than, all these secular things that people are bowing the knee to, and he bowed the knee to the living God. And he took a knee and prayed on the field. And because of that, the government school thought, well, we can't let this happen. And he can't be a coach anymore. Well, we're in the Supreme Court right now. We're supporting him because you instinctively know. How do you protect it? What's the right you're protecting there?
Freedom of
The
expression.
free exercise of religion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're also trying to stand for it because the government's saying, well, you're establishing a religious government by taking a knee on. No. I mean, that's how crazy it's gotten. And so this is the other thing one of the ways that you preserve and protect and defend your rights is check and make sure that the government entity that is acting and doing the thing they're doing to you, not only do they have the power, to do it, but is it even within their role? I mean, the Supreme Court of the United States has one of the ways that they are slowly taking away and changing our constitutional form of government is you put people in the Supreme Court that don't believe in the Constitution and don't believe they have to follow those liberties that you've asked me to talk about tonight. And so one of the things that you can do is, I don't know how many people wrote letters to the Senate Judiciary Committee, because you've got a nominee right now, and I don't care, we don't chase the elephant or the donkey up here. We look at everything through the lens of of God, of the Bible. But when I'm looking at a nominee and I want to preserve our liberties and protect our liberties and protect our rights for the future, I ask some questions. Do you recognize those liberties? Do you recognize that as a Supreme Court justice, you have no authority to do anything other than to resolve cases and controversies? And taking the Constitution as you receive it, and then resolve the controversy, as opposed to saying, I don't have to accept the Constitution. I can change it because I'm wearing a robe, and then I'll resolve the controversy. I don't care what the color of the person's skin is. I don't care anything about, with regard to a Supreme Court justice, other than their content of their character and their competency as a lawyer, and they're willing to, when they take the oath. I took the oath recently as the senior advisor to the U.S. State Department. And I previously took that same oath when I was a federal judge. And you put your hand on the Holy Bible, and you promise to uphold the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. And the question is, I watched, and again, this is not a Democratic or a Republican thing. I watched and listened to much of those hearings. She's going to take that oath, but nothing I heard in the answers that were coming from her suggested that she's going to actually keep what she is going to say and promise. And let me tell you, this is not a Democratic or a Republican thing, because you had people on the right decide not to follow the Constitution before in our history. It's only today where you have the left that are taking positions on the court and not following the Constitution. And again, it shouldn't matter what your race is. It should matter, are you willing to uphold the Constitution? And how do you impact that? Well, once they're on the court, there's not much you can do. So one of the ways you preserve and protect your rights is you get involved during the process.
Yeah, one problem with taking the position that they're not going to follow the oath. They'll say they are. And they'll say it sincerely, right? Because how they interpret that is, it's a living document. And I have to apply it to a modern context. That's how I uphold the Constitution. So, I mean, if you ask her, are you going to uphold the Constitution? No, absolutely. The problem is, it's not the Constitution that was written, it's the Constitution that she's going to rewrite. Right? So, again, you have to understand what your interlocutor is saying, what the words they're using mean. And, I think a lot of the living constitutionalists are trying to do the right thing. Just, they have a wrong idea of what the right thing is. Right?
You're kinder than I am. I did in law school, and I did for the first 3 years. There's something that happens to these people on the left. They put a robe on, and I call it robe disease, and all of a sudden, they truly do feel, I mean...
Well, I know, judges let it go to their head a lot of the times. There are good ones and there are bad ones. But in terms of the living Constitution, there's nothing you or I can do about it except, again, ask the questions. How is this going to work if, someone that you disagree with puts on that robe and says, this is what the living Constitution means, and it's bad for you. I mean, it's all great.
And if I'm a businessman and I'm supposed to have predictability with the law and I'm making business decisions and all of a sudden we got a right-wing judge saying one thing because he wants it that way, and now we got a left-wing judge saying just the opposite, and you're never going to know what the law, the whole idea is the law is the law of the law. The law doesn't change. And you can pretend it's changing. You can say it's a living Constitution, but that is the most disingenuous, and most of the time it's a lie. And I think John's right in the sense that in their own mind, their heart is in the right place. They think their heart's in the right place. They think they're doing good. They think they're doing something that they have the authority to do. But that's only because law professors have indoctrinated them to think to believe this false truth. And like John said, all you got to do is ask a couple of questions, and they're tied up. They can't answer. Oh, you think that it's okay to, even though it's not in the Constitution, to say it's okay for a woman to kill an unborn child because it's a matter of choice and the government ought not to protect that life. Well, what if you all of a sudden then just say, okay, well now you've got a different judge that starts, saying, all the rights that you don't like. It starts creating new economic rights, and says that anybody can fire anybody they want at any time. And that's a constitutional right to happiness. All of a sudden they're not going to want to do that. And you will always win the argument. But winning the argument doesn't always preserve your liberty. And it doesn't always, and it doesn't necessarily preserve, the republic. We've got to not just win the argument, but we've got to bring some of them over, and if we can't bring them over, we got to make sure they don't get on the bench. And I'm serious about that. And it's just as bad with regard to the administrative state. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission is not an elected branch of government. We're in the Michigan Supreme Court right now representing a number of businesses that are just trying to exercise their religious conscience and make business decisions with regard to their faith. And they're being told they can't do that. And the reason they're being told they can't do that is because the Michigan Civil Rights Commission says, we're going to change the meaning of the law. And we're going to add some categories to the civil rights law.
Well, give them some details.
What's that?
Give them some details.
The Michigan Civil Rights Law, prohibits discrimination based on sex and race and religion. And all of a sudden the Civil Rights Commission says, well, and nobody has disagreed that sex meant men and women. The author of the bill, and we presented it to the Supreme Court. When they actually passed the law, the people that authored the law said it doesn't include sexual identity and orientation and all this other stuff. 11 times later, people tried to add those other categories, and the legislature said, no, we're not going to add it. Well, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, for all these years, said it doesn't include those things. Somebody needs to add it. Well, okay, that's a good debate. We should have that debate in the legislature. But the Michigan Civil Rights Commission said we're not going to let the legislature, we're not going to let the people's representatives decide this. We, an unelected body, are going to say that, these other things are included. We're in front of the Supreme Court right now. We've got about as best a case as I've ever seen with regard to the facts and with regard to the law. We're probably going to lose. Not because we don't have solid law and solid facts, and they have no law and no facts, but because who's sitting on the Supreme Court right now? If you want to preserve your rights, you better start getting involved at the precinct delegate level all the way through. Because if you don't, it matters who you put on the Supreme Court in Michigan. If somebody on the Supreme Court says, I don't have to follow the law, but I can advance my personal political agenda because I'm wearing a robe, that's wrong. I don't care if they're advancing a right-wing agenda or a left-wing agenda. This happens to be a left-wing agenda. preserve and protect and defend your rights, check the lane that the government actor is in. If they're outside their lane and you've got a judge acting like a legislator, or you've got an executive agency acting like a legislator, and taking away the value of your liberty because you, an American citizen, a citizen of Michigan, a citizen of Jackson, elected officials to represent you, and now you've got somebody else outside of that realm usurping that role. Well, one of the things you can do is in that next election, you put people in office that are going to follow the Constitution. And I know this is hard. You're saying, well, geez, we've tried this, and it's hard. If it's the legislature, you've got to be, we put out once a month, we try to track every piece of legislation that impacts Christian people. And we don't say vote for it or vote against it, but we'll put a little red or a little green light next to it and say, hey, this is consistent with biblical principles, this is not consistent with biblical principles. And if you see something that they're going to take away your child and put it under and make your child the government's child, well, that's a piece of legislation that you want to be part of, right? So check our thing and then track that piece of legislation. And now, this is not beyond the realm of, I'm not speaking crazy here. Every one of you can go and impact that law because it's got to go through a committee hearing. And at a committee hearing, they hear testimony. How many people have testified before the state legislature? 3. Before next year, everybody in here, do at least one time. Find a law that you need to protect your liberty in, or you need to stand, and in the way that John suggested that you do it, become a citizen statesman. Become a Christian statesman. Be very short, be very clear, why you support it, why you oppose it, and speak from your heart. Let them see the heart of Jesus, how you do it, and sit down. Write a letter. How you write the letter matters, though. I should have just not even talked. We should have just left it where you talked at the beginning, because that is actually the most important thing. How you do it matters. I've served, as chief counsel at the state legislature, have a committee, and we would get lots of letters from people. And if you get letters that are just yelling at you and screaming at you and saying nasty things about you, nobody reads the substance of it, what's in there, even if you're 100% right. So you want to present your arguments in a very clear and concise way. And when I say concise, these legislators are very busy. So no more than a page. Get it very clear. What's your position? Why you support it? And then get everybody else in your world around you in your world of influence around you. Get them involved too. And you say, well, we've been doing this. That just sounds like I keep running into a closed door, or both my senators don't agree with anything I agree with, so why do I bottom write a letter? Never, ever give up. Abraham Lincoln, I can't tell you how many races he lost. His business went bankrupt. He lost somebody he loved. He had serious mental issues because of some of the bad things that happened in his life. He lost race after race after race. He became the president of the United States, one of the most powerful impacts on our nation ever. And if you don't want to hear about a politician, Michael Jordan. You know how many times Michael Jordan was put in to take that last shot at the buzzer and missed it? A lot more times than he made. And he says that, I have failed so many times, but that's the reason I'm a success. is because just because you write these letters and just because you testify and the bill goes the other way, you've got to keep coming at it. The other side's been doing, the reason the other side has gone from where they were in 1955 to where they are right now is because they have been relentless since 1955. And we are just waking up now to the place where, okay, we need to be relentless back because we're about to lose everything that matters. And we still have a constitutional framework that allows you to use things like the courts to protect your rights. But so often you can protect your rights and preserve your rights before you go to court. That's not a cheap thing. You go to court, that's $50,000 to $85,000 endeavor right there. And I know because we have to raise that kind of money to fight these fights. Is it worth it? Yeah. Because we're moving the law. And we're moving the Supreme Court. And every once in a while, we save a business. Or we save a job. But you have to be relentless. And you have to never give up. And you have to realize, I think, just how valuable this thing is we have. This great experiment that our founders started, in 1787. Is it worth fighting for? And for those of you that are here before, I think I quoted Ronald Reagan when I was here last time, but we got some new people, so I'll quote him again. This freedom isn't in the bloodstream, folks. Each generation has to get up and fight for it. And we have to be relentless, and we have to sacrifice. And sometimes it means we have to sacrifice greatly. I'm going to make a prediction, John, that you and I someday are going to be cellmates. Because we are peacefully going to stand for truth. We're going to fiercely be unafraid to speak the truth, and we're going to do it in the right way. But they're either going to shoot us or they're going to put us in jail. I hope that's not the case. But for each one of you, I ask the question, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to lose your house? Are you willing to lose everything you've saved for the last 40 years so that your grandchild can be free? These are hard questions, but I think it's time that we ask them.
You guys better get busy because I don't want to go to jail.
I should open up some questions now. Huh? Good.
Okay, hopefully I'm not going to reverb on everybody. All right, so I got some questions. Does anybody else have any other questions that they filled out that they want picked up? Raise your hand. Okay, 1 minute? Okay, all right. See the lovely lady right there in the curly hair? She belongs to me. She'll take care of you. Okay, all right, so the first question. What's a good way to figure out if an individual is a member of the World Economic Forum? I didn't write it.
That's a whole mouthful.
Yeah. I don't know the answer. I mean, but I can give you a general answer with regard to how do you know.
Yes, geez.
Man, all you got to do is be in a room for not too long.
Yeah.
And usually you don't even have to ask any questions. But part of the way that you do it is you equip yourselves to understand the world through the perspective that God gave you. And in the old days, we didn't have to worry about that because they taught the alphabet through that perspective. A was for Adam, who and C was Christ who came to save us. That perspective was everything was taught. Math and science was taught through that perspective. That perspective is not taught anymore. So one of the first things you need to do, whether it's economics or politics, is equip yourself so that you are in a place that you are seeing all of who you are and all of what you do through the lens of God's Word. And I don't mean just on Sunday during the sermon, because we all can do that. But are we already seeing the world through the eyes of the world by the football game in the afternoon? And make a commitment tonight if you can. This is a commitment that I'm trying to make with myself, and it's not an easy commitment. Will you surrender all so that you see all of who you are all the time through His perspective, and all of what you do through His perspective? And then it'll be easy, whatever the question is, how to identify the person. I'm sorry, maybe I should know more about the question, but I didn't. Is there someone, the person that asked the question?
I'll take it over there.
If you want to know somebody's a member of the WEF, just ask them. That's a simple solution. But if they deny it, why, don't overlook the obvious, right? But they're coming from that other end of the spectrum, the collectivists. If every solution comes out of Washington or Brussels for these people, you know which end they're aligned with, and that they want your power. That's the name of the game. You as an individual have God-given rights, freedom, liberty, equality, etc. They want it. They're smarter than you. They know how to run things better. That's that mentality. And we got to meet somewhere in the middle, all right? We have a Republican form of government. We elect people to represent us because we think they're going to do a good job of running things, you know? But these people don't want elections. They just want to run things, all right? And they want more and more power, and that's how you identify them.
And if you want to just see that, just go see how the European Union is run. It's ugly. You know, when we were fighting these battles over in England because we knew they were coming here from England, and 84%, at the time we were there, 84% of the laws that governed the people of the United Kingdom were passed in Brussels. And they didn't even know that. You know, once they did, we had Brexit.
Okay, this next one's a multi-part question, so stay with me. Where are the educational lines drawn when children are exposed to content reading material that's borderline porn? That's the first one. It doesn't belong in schools, but what control do we have from the outside? Are there no laws in place to prevent the sexualizing of minors? And should we involve our local law enforcement? Hashtag parental rights. Whoever wrote the hashtag.
There are laws. There are laws. They're not being enforced. They're the obscenity laws of the United States, and the Supreme Court has interpreted those laws to uphold them as not, it's not speech if it falls within the category of, you know, of what the Supreme Court says obscene. So depending on what you're talking about, there are laws. I can tell you that as a United States prosecutor, I had a conviction that at the time was the largest criminal forfeiture in the history of the federal government. And everybody thought that I had prosecuted this big drug case. I had not. I had prosecuted an obscenity case, and that shows you how much money is behind this kind of thing and what you're dealing with. And so there's a couple things you can do. Number one, you can pull your kids out of school, like we talked about before. Now, number two, you can have a school board member. You know, make sure that the school board is controlled by people that are going to put educational materials in the school. You're not censoring any book. You're deciding what are the books the children in this school district are going to learn from. They can read anything they want to at any other time, but when they're in the school, you know, we're about educating, you know, reading, writing, and preparing them for the future. And there's nothing inappropriate about removing things that, you know, first of all, obscenity has never been considered speech. It's never, and just like slander is not protected speech, defamation is not protected speech, neither is obscenity. Now, that's a legal definition, and so depending on what the book was, it may not meet that definition of obscenity, so it may not be considered illegal contraband under the laws of the United States. At that point, it's a decision that your school board is making. Which book, we're not going to censor any books, but we're going to decide which books are going to be available for the education of the children within the school district. If they want to, if their parents want to, give them a porn later, let the parents do it. But certainly the school shouldn't do it.
I'll answer this next question. Has Congressman Wahlberg ever come to a Patriot meeting, or has he been invited? Where is Amy? Wave your hand, Amy. Amy? Congressman Wahlberg is going to be here next month, is that correct? No. GOP. That's right. I'm sorry. That's where I saw that. He's going to be at the GOP. Sorry, he's going to be.
Flyers are on the chair.
Right. He always has an open invitation here, so I know that, but I know he's going to be at the GOP meeting next week. Next Thursday. Same place, right where you're sitting right now. So, where do we find those red and green button issues you mentioned? Is there a website?
Yeah. Go to, and this website's in the back too at our table back there, but it's SLG for Salt Lake Global, slgwitness.com.
And there are forms on all of your chairs that is a little white piece of paper, and they have an info table at the back. If you want to take that form with you, and if you like what they talked about tonight, you can link it online or hand it to them, but you can also go to the website to do that.
Yeah, but the website always has helpful information on how to see these issues and equip yourself to go out and engage the culture. But that's slgwitness.com. And we put it up once a month. It's going to actually go up tomorrow, so watch for the most recent one tomorrow. And we also cover a lot of federal laws, too.
Okay. What do you think will happen in Michigan should Roe versus Wade be reversed? What do you think will happen in Michigan should Roe versus Wade be reversed?
That's a really good question. We have a brief. We've got two briefs in the U.S. Supreme Court in this case. We represent the American Association of Pro-Life Physicians and some a national bioethics center. There are the votes on the court right now to gut Roe versus Wade or overthrow it. I'm predicting they will gut it, and I'm predicting that they will say the state has the power to regulate these issues. Why? Because it's not something in the federal government, so therefore it's reserved to the states, and part of the role of government is to what? Protect us. And so there are finally, I think, a majority of the court that will do that. The answer to the question specifically is get ready and buckle up, because if you're a member of a church right now, there's a bunch of groups out there that are doing a lot of helpful things for pregnant women right now that are considering abortion, and they decide not to. They decide to have their child. Guess what? There's going to be thousands and thousands more. So the church better get ready to start loving on these families and being there for them. The second thing for a group like this to be ready for is the left is not going to want to stand for it. Michigan has the strongest law in the United States protecting life in the womb. There's not a law stronger in the United States. It protects life in the womb earlier than any other law in the United States, from the point of conception. The left knows that. The left is spending gazillions of dollars right now, and they've got, and the current administration and current people that oppose life in the womb are trying to repeal that law right now as we speak. So when you go to slgwitness.com and you look up those things, one of the things you're going to see is you're going to see people trying to get rid of the strongest law in the nation. And why would they want to get rid of a law that hasn't been enforced since 1970? Because they know that Roe versus Wade is about to be dismantled. And once that happens, Michigan's law has already been upheld by the Michigan Supreme Court as valid. After Roe versus Wade came down, Michigan Supreme Court said, if Roe ever goes away, this law is enforceable still. That's why the left is trying to get it. So two things are going to happen. Politically, you got to fight to keep the law to protect unborn life, and morally, you got to be ready to love on these mothers that are going to need that love right now, because they will make the right choice. And if you don't love on them, they're going to get on a bus and go to New York, where you can kill your baby even if it's coming out of the birth canal. Right. Yep. 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 I meant to add that, in addition to the proposed legislation, they've got a petition initiative to do. So,
Okay. All right, so we're going to breeze through these next three. Promise? Can we sue the school board?
anybody can always sue anybody. You know, you have to have a legitimate cause of action.
Okay. What's two examples of legitimate cause of action?
Thank you.
Well, legitimate cause of action is, for example, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission or the Michigan School Board. We dealt with them as well. You know, they started enforcing this law that didn't exist, that they made up. So, well, it depends on what the school boards do. Child abuse, depends on what the school boards do. If they enact a policy and then they enforce that policy, say, I got one. Say the school board enforces a policy that says every child has to be vaccinated even until they're 2 years old. And you as a parent say, as a matter of my religious conscience, and you've got reasons because, you know, aborted fetal tissue, whatever, that we should not have vaccines, as a matter of my sincerely held religious conscience, and that school board says, no, you're going to be forced to, you know, have your child vaccinated. I suppose you could challenge, because once again, the court, what's their authority to do that? Even if they have authority to do that, can they do it in such a way that is what? Not interfering with one of your rights. And so that might be a way that you could do it. But answer your question, depends on what they're doing.
All right, I think this is a Professor Kane question. Can decentralized digital currency and/or privacy coins provide a digital asset class that provides privacy and protection from government control and/or interference?
Wow. That is not a Professor Kane question. That's a way over my head question. I think the general cryptocurrencies are really complicated technical issues. There's even among the experts, there's a lot of debate about how secure they are. But I think the Biden administration is not going down this road with your privacy concerns in mind. Okay, they're going for this for the opposite reason, for control purposes. And I sincerely doubt that, well, I mean, there may be one or two or a few, I don't know, there's thousands of cryptocurrencies, some that are really secure. I think most of them aren't, and I think even the ones that we believe are really secure might not be, because we don't know everything about, you know, who coded. We don't even know who invented Bitcoin. So they may know how to make it look really secure and have a backdoor that nobody knows about. I don't know. I would be extraordinarily concerned about any government-controlled digital currency, because it is, I think, the greatest instrument of government control we have ever seen and ever will see. I think it's going to be the last one, because it will control not only, it's not just a question of privacy, it's a question of control. I mean, they can not only see what you're doing, they can stop you from doing it if they disagree with where you're spending your money or how you're spending your money or who you are. But yeah, that's way above my state. That's enough to be dangerous. No, it's dangerous.
Okay, the last one, and keep in mind, I didn't write these, so I'm just reading exactly what's on these.
Don't tell them this.
Okay, so this one says, I'm hearing about environmental social governance, or ESG, with regards to investments. What can our government do to stop this?
What goes back to the things we were talking about. It's not what can our government do, what can we the people do. We the people can do certain things. We can impact who our representatives are.
Well, that's, I think, again, this is a little complicated for me. I'm just a low country lawyer here. But ESG, as I understand it, primarily refers to investment policies. You know, so hedge funds, mutual funds will buy certain stocks and not buy other stocks. It's mostly a free market issue, except we don't have free markets anymore, right? We have an awful lot of centralized control outside of the government in the corporate world. I mean, look at Google, look at Facebook, look at, you know, Twitter, Yahoo. That's not the government. And yet, they have an awful lot of control over our culture and our society. This is, my understanding of ESG is it's just a question of, the whole social justice movement. It's, virtue signaling. It's wrong to buy oil companies. All right, that's my understanding of what they're getting at there, and that's a free market thing. If you don't like ESG, go somewhere else. But if Fidelity stops offering, or stops buying certain corporations because they've been pressured to avoid them, that's just like the government acting. You can't do anything about it. They're too big. And another thing Fidelity has been doing, this is a huge issue in charitable giving, donor-advised funds and so forth. They are refusing, Fidelity right now, for example, is refusing to allow people investing in their donor-advised funds, this is a private charitable thing, using Fidelity to contribute to the NRA. Right? So they're selecting who can use these huge financial vehicles, right? And it's the NRA today, who knows who it is next, right? But it's the politicization of finance, I think, is the heart of the problem with ESG, and it's even bigger than that. You know who controls the media, and these guys listen to the media.
But doesn't the ESG scores flow over into other things because that's how they're going to do business, is your ESG score?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I've been hearing a lot about that.
Yeah. Well, that's the cancel culture.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's spreading to finance, but for sure. I think that's basically what's going on.
But that gives me a way to maybe close this here. Is that, not just in this particular area, but have you noticed that in all the spheres of influence, even though they don't run this country yet, the left is controlling all the spheres of influence. The left controls the media, the left controls the educational institutions, the left increasingly is controlling business. They don't have all of it, but they've got a lot of it. The left is controlling a lot of government. And so, even though they don't have a majority in the country yet, they are controlling all the different spheres of influence in the country and forcing it on you. So that's the other way that you can protect, and we'll close this way, protect and preserve and defend your rights, is you've got to change some of that. And so, lawyers, for example, need to get on the Rules of Professional Responsibility Committee. If you work in a hospital, then you need to get on the ethics committee. You need to get on these different places of influence, because they've been doing that for years, and they control all those boards. They control all those committees. They control far too many school boards. We've just realized that now, and wow, look at that movement that's happening. Look how many people are here tonight. And this is how we retake the ground that was improperly taken from us. You have to take it back. You have to do it lawfully. You have to do it properly. You have to do it peacefully. But you have to be fiercely unafraid. And you have to be willing to pay whatever the cost is. And I think this country's worth it. And if you got a grandbaby, and we do, take a look at that grandbaby, and you'll know that it's worth it. So God bless you. Thanks for listening tonight.